This guy is a blur on tape. He zigs and zags.
He's a complete freak of nature, maybe one of the biggest freaks that we've seen.
Hello and welcome into the 24/7 Sports College Football Recruiting Podcast. I'm National Recruiting Analyst Cooper Petagna alongside 24/7 Sports Director of Scouting Andrew Ivins. And Drew, I'm looking at the rundown, pretty busy rundown depending on who you are. One, happy Freaks List Day to you, the father of the Freaks List here on the high school side, Andrew Ivins. 8,000 words. You can check that out on 247sports.com. You'll be sure. We're definitely going to dive into that thing. A lot to get into. Preview a couple five-star commitments as well. And money. Courtney Morgan, you may have heard, the new highest paid general manager in all of college football. He signs a deal. We'll get into that in a second. But Drew, let's start with Dylan Riola, the former five-star. I think we knew this was coming, but announced as the starter today at Nebraska. Your thoughts to this?
Yeah, we knew it was coming. I don't think it was all that surprising. Nebraska had one of the worst passing offenses in all of college football last season. Cooper, how many shows and segments have we talked about Dylan Riola potentially being the true freshman quarterback that plays? And really, if you go back to the 2023 recruiting cycle, you go back to the 2024 recruiting cycle, the guys at the top of the board, they all kind of sat as freshmen. So Dylan Riola getting thrust into the spotlight here. I'm going to throw it to you. I mean, Colorado, week 2. I mean, it's a pretty easy schedule for the Cornhuskers. What are you expecting? A long leash for Mr. Riola?
I think so. I mean, they're financially invested, right? So you have to think that, Dylan Riola, the new face of the Nebraska program, this is going to be a guy that, quite honestly, I'm fired up to see. Nebraska fans are fired up to see. When's the last time you had a guy like this high touted of a prospect in Lincoln at the quarterback position? But Drew, you brought it up, that schedule, the first 4 games of the season, they're all at home. You got UTEP at home, Colorado week 2, one of the worst passing defenses in all of college football last year, Northern Iowa, and then Illinois. For a freshman quarterback starting his career in that position, that's a pretty manageable schedule for Dylan Riola. Drew, I think the other thing that we want to hit on, Dylan Riola has played in a lot of different systems, played in 4 different programs over his high school career, played at Beaufort in Georgia. That was his last stop. 34 touchdowns, 1 INT. This offense, what they want to do, I think it's going to be more of complementary, lean on the run game a little bit. They have one of the top defenses in all of college football, but they have to protect him. You brought up the fact that they weren't very dynamic through the air. It can only go up, which is why I think Matt Rule is comfortable with Dylan Riola in this spot. But they got to protect this guy. They gave up 30-plus sacks last year. They were 93rd in the country in that category. That's the only thing. Like, when I put my head on the pillow at night, the only thing that I worry about is shaking this dude's confidence up a little bit. And that way you get halfway through the season into the Big Ten schedule. And this is a guy where it's like, all right, now we got to build this guy back up. So if they can get through that first third of the season, I'm okay. But I got to be honest, I'm saying some prayers about that.
Coop, I think you'll like the sound of this. I think one of the biggest question marks about Dylan Riola is what happens when adversity hits. You mentioned it. He's been from high school to high school. He learned that offense at Beaufort in 6 weeks. We didn't know where he was going to play his senior season. He comes out, throws just 1 interception over 250 pass attempts. I think his ability to not only protect the football, but take a sack when you need to take a sack. So many times these talented quarterbacks, they try to do a little bit too much. I thought Dylan Riola, as a senior, his game management, his internal clock in the pocket, his ability to create some chances, but also realize, okay, let's pump the brakes. Let's take the loss of yardage here and live to fight another day. I thought he did that excellent. But I was hearing coming out of Lincoln, the veterans there in Nebraska's locker room are impressed with how he's handled himself. Dylan hasn't carried himself as the 5-star recruit, the former Elite 11 finalist. He's wanted to learn, and he's shown that he is hungry. I think for the both of us, and we've only had a limited interaction, small scope of dealing with Dylan Riola, but my biggest question is, how is he going to handle himself? What happens when he throws an interception? Because that's going to happen. What happens when he loses a game? What does that next week look like? But it sounds like so far he is completely bought in. And let's not forget, not only was the high schools all that happened, you also had multiple commitments. At one time committed to USC, was committed to Georgia. He's been all over the place, but it seems like he has found his home.
Hopefully this means good things to come for guys like Malachi Coleman, Carter Nelson, two guys that we really like, both out of the state of Nebraska, two of the most dynamic athletes I think we've seen in that program over the last couple of years. So Dylan Riola, is he the guy that primes the pump for those guys to have breakout years? Expectations, I think, need to be tempered for the 5-star, but a good situation nonetheless that he steps into. All right, Drew, the headline yesterday in all of college football recruiting, if you want to call it that, but I saw this making national headlines. Courtney Morgan, the general manager at Alabama, if you're not familiar with him, well, he's Kalen DeBoer's right-hand man. He had a new contract approved yesterday that will pay him $825,000 annually over 3 years. Good for him. That's what I have to say. This comes after the pursuit from USC that reportedly offered him over $1 million in a off-field role, something similar that you would have to guess that he's doing with Kalen DeBoer at Alabama. Drew, obviously, I will have a lot of thoughts on this one, but I want to give you the floor here. When you heard that $825,000 over 3 years, which is something that's exponential, right? Let me give a little bit of context. This is a new benchmark in college football for the player personnel world. What were your thoughts?
First reaction, I think this is where the game is going. And we've discussed this after the player and personnel symposium a few weeks ago there in Nashville. I keep saying, you keep saying, college football is becoming the NFL. And these off-field roles, these general managers, directors of player personnel, whatever the title is, more and more funds are being invested there. Coop, you were on the other side. I think when you saw that figure, we're going to see you much longer at 24/7 Sports. It makes me want to jump back into the college game. I'm sure you're feeling the same way.
Yeah, I don't know about that, and I'll tell you this, congratulations to Courtney. The interesting part about this one is that, if I was Courtney, I'd be sending a gift basket over to Lincoln Riley and Jen Cohen over at USC. Courtney was already, I believe, the highest paid personnel executive in all of college football, just north of $500,000. He gets the raise in the extension here, now making $825,000 a year. So he is not setting the market. He is lapping the market. There are a lot of other good personnel execs out there. You go down the list: Mark Pantoni, Marshall Malkow at Oregon, Austin Thomas at LSU. Those are going to be the guys that I think benefit from this the most. The other part that was brought to my attention this morning, this is good for the other guys in the department that don't have the general manager title, the director of player personnel. Maybe they're assistant DPP, maybe they're director of on-campus recruiting. But now, as Josh Pate always likes to say, a rising tide raises all boats. And I think that's kind of what's happening here in the college football player personnel world. Courtney Morgan being able to almost touch $1 million is a huge deal. Everybody's talking about Alabama and Courtney Morgan, and for good reason. I don't think the attention should be deflected from USC. And USC is in a position right now, Drew, where I'm writing a story on the 24/7 Sports talent team composite, where USC is going to be the lowest that they've ever been in the 10 years of its existence. They're going to be at number 15. And this was a team during the Pete Carroll era that was very high, that you would expect in the top 5, that was running with Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State. That is not the case anymore. So to pursue a guy like Courtney Morgan kind of tells me a little bit more about USC's situation and saying, hey, we're going to throw a bunch of money at this guy that we think can come in. And this has nothing to do with Courtney. They could throw $1 million at Howie Roseman, the GM of the Philadelphia Eagles. And I don't think that's going to fix your problems all in one fell swoop. So there's no magic wand that if you're Jen Cohen, Lincoln Riley, to say, let me just wave this thing, or let me go out and get the hottest name on the market, and we're going to be able to fix all the problems that we have. So that's kind of where my thought went to. In terms of the financials of all this type of stuff, I think this is certainly going to help other players in the market. But it is interesting. How many Courtney Morgans are there out there? How many Mark Pantonis? How many Marshall Malkows? That's going to be the thing. And are teams ready to commit that type of financial investment in their off-field support staff roles? Because guess what? Not everybody looks at a James Blanchard or a Courtney Morgan and the list goes on and has the same type of trust level with their general manager or their director of player personnel. In a lot of ways, these guys are given autonomy that has never been seen before at the college football level. But as the game changes, we see the revenue share, we see the transfer portal, we see the frequency of player movement. These guys are going to be in a really good spot to maximize their potential. And the other thing, Drew, the last thing I thought was these agencies, Athletes First, CAA, it really didn't make a ton of sense for them to rep player personnel executives back in the day because their ROI, their return on investment, was so minimal. If these guys are making north of $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, I think you're going to see that market start to heat up and try to infiltrate their way into the personnel community as well.
Hey, Alabama, that recruiting class that's in the top 5, I think 6 guys are from the state of California. USC has had its issues in their own backyard. So not surprising to what you said about, hey, trying to fix the problem with a guy that's had a ton of success there. And obviously Courtney Morgan is not the one, that is recruiting all those individuals. He just kind of tees it up for some of that staff that Kalen DeBoer has put together.
All right, final note on this one. 7 consecutive years, Alabama, Georgia, or Ohio State has been in the top 3 of the 24/7 Sports team talent composite. So if I'm Mark Pantoni at Ohio State, if I'm Will Myers at Georgia, those are things that I'm bringing up to Kirby Smart and to Ryan Day and saying, hey, look, these guys have been doing it at a high level. Look at what he's getting paid. That's the name of the business. That's how it goes. That's how it goes in the coaching world. Why wouldn't it go in the personnel world the same way? Guys, just a reminder, you are locked into the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel, watching the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast with Cooper Petagna and Andrew Ivins. You can find us every Wednesday at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. Please make sure to like and subscribe. And if you have a question, I know we haven't done it in a while, but if you have a question, please make sure to submit that in the chat on the YouTube channel. Guys, we appreciate you stopping by as always. All right, Drew, let's not bury the lead. I said it was a big day because it's Freaks List Day. We talked a little bit about it on the show Monday on the 24/7 Sports College Football Show, the Freaks List. And I'll give a little bit of background. Chances are, if you're watching this show, you're into the nitty gritty. You kind of like the nerdy recruiting stuff. But the Freaks List is something that is comprised by Andrew Ivins every single year. He's been doing it for 4 years running now, kind of built on the back of Bruce Feldman and the idea of what he does with the athletic and some of the top college prospects in the country in freaky traits. I mean, that is it at the top of it. And Drew, this kind of works well because we got a couple 5-star commitments coming up and a guy that's got a decision to make this weekend, but he's also the number 1 player on the Freaks List. Jonah Williams, the floor is yours, my friend. I read the blurb that you had on him. I just loved it.
You said it, Coop, 4 years in a row. So when we first started this thing, it was Malachi Starks, the do-it-all safety at Georgia, who's likely going to be a first-round pick. He was the number 1 guy. Year after that, Nick Harbor. I don't think there needs to be much of an explanation there. The following year, last year, it was Sammy Brown, the linebacker at Clemson, who it sounds like he's going to play as a true freshman. When I came into this year, there was no real clear-cut number 1. Then I started talking with personnel people. I started talking, with different sources around the country. And the name that I continued to circle was Jonah Williams. And that's because he could be a first-round pick in the NFL draft, or he could be a first-round pick in the MLB draft. We're talking about a kid, Cooper, 6'3", 205 pounds. You see him playing safety here. You're looking for a comp on the football field. I think Kyle Hamilton works, Isaiah Simmons, Sony Styles. All of those have been tossed out. 6 INTs returned for touchdowns over the past 2 years, 8 special teams touchdowns, 800 yards of total offense, 117 tackles. This guy gets it done in between the hashes. On the baseball field, he is a rangy center fielder. He can lay down a bunt and get from home plate to first base in 3.52 seconds. The average for that time in the majors, 4.2 seconds. So he can hit, he can cover some ground in the outfield. But MLB scouts, baseball scouts, they love the idea of this kid as a pitcher. I had one contact tell me they went to see Jonah Williams this summer, and he didn't really warm up before he pitched. He did some long ball. He gets up on the bump, lefty, throws 94 miles per hour. And that same person pointed out that Jonah Williams has never really specialized in baseball and pitching. That's what makes him so intriguing there. Cooper, he's also all-district defensive MVP on the basketball court. ran a track meet for the first time using borrowed spikes and qualified for regionals in the 200-meter dash. And then, at the Under Armour Next Camp Series, he went 4.5 in the 40-yard dash, 4.3 in the short shuttle. Both of those are top 5 times in the class of 2025 for prospects over 200 pounds. This dude is one of a kind. And his older brother was actually a first-round pick in the MLB draft, now playing in Mexico. So it's kind of a total combination. And normally, Cooper, when we talk about, all right, these dual sport athletes, like, could he really play 2 sports? Could he really get drafted in 2 sports? I was talking with a SEC defensive coordinator over the weekend, and they're involved in Jonah Williams' recruitment. And he said, we were trying to get the baseball coaches on board, and they were kind of rolling their eyes. Like, yeah, okay, like, we'll consider it, right? You guys sign him. Maybe he can be part of the team. Well, that baseball staff went and saw Jonah Williams pitch. They got on the phone, called back to the football offices and said, holy, you used the word there. This kid's the real deal. We want him as a pitcher right now. So Jonah Williams, one of a kind. And I'm super fired up to see where he ends up, because it sounds like, one of these recruitments where it's super rare. We got a few days to go. No one has an idea of really where Jonah Williams is leaning.
Yeah, let's put some context behind that. I mean, the 3 schools it seems like he's considering right now, Texas A&M, Texas LSU, all baseball powerhouses, right? In teams that obviously can have the pick of the litter when it comes to a baseball prospect. Drew, maybe the favorite thing that you have said about Jonah Williams in the past, you and I talking about this, and my favorite player comparison since I've been here that I've heard, Chad Jones at LSU. You talk about a dual sport athlete. Anybody out of the state of Louisiana that watches the purple and gold knows how unique of an athlete that was. Jonah Williams, he is a special kid right now. 100% of the crystal ball, not 100%, the crystal ball currently falls with the Texas A&M Aggies. Like Drew said, seems to be Texas LSU down the stretch trying to battle it out as the number 1 safety in the country comes off the board on Saturday. Congratulations to Jonah. Also, the number 1 player on the Freaks list. That is nothing to bat an eye about. Drew, another guy on the Freaks list that we like a lot, obviously, a 5-star offensive tackle, one of the best in the country, the number 5 offensive tackle, Michael Fusi, out of the state of Texas. And a really, really interesting story here, Drew, when you read on this kid. Has only been playing football for 4 years, has only been in the States for 5 years, originally from Nigeria. We talk about green numbers. He's got them all, right? This is one of those guys, height, weight, speed, corner protector at left tackle, a little bit raw, but the more you dig into the background, you understand why. Talk to us about Michael Fusi.
Yeah, in Nigeria, he played soccer, and I think that quick feet shows up when you watch him work out and on the game tape. I mean, this is a dude that is balanced, coordinated, in control. Cooper, 31.7-inch vertical jump for him. That ranks 2nd in the class for any player north of 200 pounds, according to our buddy Hudson Standish. There's video of Michael Fusi jumping from his knees to his feet and getting into pass sets. Front squatted 405 pounds for 3 reps. I'm a guy that's very familiar with the Olympic lifts. I think the mobility, his how low he can get certainly stands out there. You said it. I mean, really unique background. This is a kid I think we first got on board with at Under Armour's Future 50 camp 2 summers ago. It was like, whoa, who is this dude, Michael Fusi? He has steadily climbed in the rankings, and I think he's got a monster ceiling, Cooper. I mean, I think this guy has what it takes to eventually emerge as a first-round pick with his athleticism. Oklahoma's in there, Texas is in there, Texas A&M, Missouri, Oregon. It sounds like the Sooners are in a good spot here, according to Mike Roach and Tom Loy, heading into the 11th hour. You think about them and what they've been able to do on that offensive line. I know some new faces there this season, but he would be a huge addition for OU.
You've been banging that drum for a while because Oklahoma, that's a spot where they need to get better. They lost Caden Green, a guy that we like, to Missouri in the transfer portal. If Fusi ends up there, you like the marriage with a guy like Bill Beatonball. So we'll see what happens with Michael Fusi. He comes off the board today, 3 o'clock Central Time. That's a big name. Drew, the last thing I'll say about him, we got him as the number 5 offensive tackle. It's a super intriguing offensive tackle class. David Sanders commits to Tennessee over the weekend. Josh Petty off to Georgia Tech. There's been some conversations about whether or not he's going to stay at tackle, potentially move inside. You got Babaloa and Ty Haywood as well. And then there's Fusi with this monster ceiling. And then you throw in the background that this kid's only been playing the game for 4 years, and he's picked it up this quickly and become a pretty dominant player at a high level of competition in Texas. The idea of him becomes a little bit more salivating.
You're right, Cooper. Sorry, I got sidetracked there. Someone's trying to. I keep getting a phone call from a number. I don't even know what you were talking about. Fusi.
If I had to guess, it's probably somebody upset because they weren't on the freaks list. Something that Drew has to deal with way too often, whether it's a top 100, top 247 update. That's right. Fusi, I just got my point across.
I'm trying to hang up. I think the gist of what you're saying, we've discussed it in the past, the parity with the offensive tackle position, right? New faces going new places. It used to be Alabama, Georgia. They cleaned up here. And now it's with this premium position, and the name, image, likeness, and deals being able to be facilitated. You're seeing some of these premium bodies be able to go to schools that they usually wouldn't end up. And I think the other thing, I know you were talking about those 5. I think you can make the case that Fusi might have one of the highest ceilings of the bunch if we had a rank where we think they would be 3, 4, 5 years down the line. Am I wrong there, Cooper?
No, that was my point. I know your phone was getting blown up, but I could live in a world where 6 months from now, we're in the postseason all-star setting, and it's Michael Fusi that we think might have the highest ceiling in the bunch. Not only the highest ceiling, but maybe has played his way into that. And this is a dude, we got him at 27, Drew. I think at the time it was somewhat of a calculated shot. We love the traits. We just wanted to see him continue to develop as a football player. I think this guy's got an outside shot at maybe being one of the best 1 or 2 tackles in the country. That's kind of the point that I was trying to get across. But Drew, let's continue with the freaks list. This thing is 50 deep, so we got to be really particular about which guys we want to talk about, which I like because it kind of puts you in a little bit of a corner and the guys that have really stood out to you in this process. But let's start with Stephon Shivers, one of those big dudes as Georgia is trying to replace guys like Jalen Carter. You like this guy a lot.
Cooper, do you remember Tractor Trailer from the And One mixtape tour? You know what I'm talking about?
How could I forget? Absolutely. Oh, yeah.
The big man down low. Yeah, that's my player comp for Stephon Shivers. Last measurement I got on him, 6'3", 380 pounds, big dude. And he has scored over 1,000 career points on the hardwood. I don't know if any of our guys have footage of him, but he's a nimble mover, right? He can pass layups, spin down low in the post. And then you turn on the tape, you see him right here at running back. He's going to go 62 yards for a touchdown. Dug even further in here, Cooper, right? His 40-yard dash time, it isn't going to blow many away. 5.46. But if you look at all of the prospects over the past 8 cycles that weighed over 350 pounds, that's the 6th best 40 time for someone that size. The number 1 guy, Tadaro Slayton, who's in the NFL. Look, Georgia wants to hoard all the mass. We always talk about that offensive line class. Well, they got a big boy on the defensive line. And, we'll see if they can rework the body. But if Stephon Shivers hits, I think he has a chance to be like Jordan Davis in the middle for the Bulldogs. So he's one that certainly jumped out to me.
That's such an unassuming 40 time that you wouldn't think anything of, and then you dig in a little bit more, and you're like, well, this guy is 380 pounds. He just ripped off a 5.46. Like you said, over 8 years of data, he's in the top 99 percentile there. Pretty good stat to be. You add in the basketball stuff, pretty freaky. Certainly, Georgia fans out there wondering where this guy is at rankings-wise, kind of knocking on the door of 4-star status, if you want to say that. He's in my region. This is a guy that I wanted to see. He's got all the physical accolades, like I said. I kind of want to see him kind of work into shape a little bit. He's at Brentwood Academy. I think this guy has all of the ability to be a dominant interior defensive lineman at the next level, especially in the SEC. Really excited about him and his development. Drew, another guy I was thinking of you and laughing because I know how much you probably loved writing about this guy. Deshaun Willis committed to Mississippi State.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, LSU led the way. They had 6 guys in the top 50, and I could have put, I think, another 4 or 5 from their commit list in there. I mean, Bryce Underwood, our number 1 ranked prospect. I was like, should I have Bryce in? Should I not? Then there's video of him doing backflips. Well, the other team that I think has a ton of sneaky freaks in their class is Mississippi State. 3 in the top 50, almost had a 4th in there. And it starts with Tyshawn Willis. I'm all in on this kid, Cooper. 2-time weightlifting champ there in Mississippi, holds the state 1A record with a 660-pound deadlift in the 224-pound weight class, squats 585, has a pair of silver medals in the shot put, and then you turn on the game tape. This dude can get after the quarterback, 20.5 sacks last season. He also plays some tight end / wide receiver / running back. He is dynamic. I get it, a little sawed off, but I'm all in on this individual. His 40-yard dash time in the 99th percentile as well. Mississippi State, you look towards the NFL, they have a lot of pass rushers in the league playing on Sundays. I think Tyshawn Willis is a name you file away for another day because he's got some dynamite in the lower half.
Tucked just inside the top 24/7, or a super intriguing name. Drew, you and I talked about it on Monday's show, but when you're putting this list together, when I'm reading it, when other people are reading it, especially on the scouting side, you're like, it gives a different context and breathes kind of new life into these players and kind of how you see him. Deshaun Willis, the more and more you read his off-field resume, the more impressed that you are. And you're saying, like, why am I not putting more stock into that guy as a premier edge rusher at the next level? So super excited about Deshaun Willis and what he's going to look like as a senior. All right, Drew, 2 guys for me. And, this is your day. So I'm gonna just set them up, give a couple of quick thoughts, add some context into what you think. Michael Terry, we've talked a lot about him on the show. He's a 5-star for a reason. The line that got me was a former quarterback that did Taekwondo as a youngster. I don't even really know what Taekwondo is. I'm probably going to have to Google it after this show. I got a somewhat of an idea in my mind, but Drew, this guy, super unique prospect, already over 200 pounds. You highlighted in the story. Is he a receiver? Is he a running back? Is he a linebacker? I think colleges are trying to figure that out as well. It really doesn't matter where he plays at the next level. This guy's going to be dynamite, not to mention 6'4" in the high jump at over 200 pounds is absolutely nuts. And also a guy that accounted for over 1,500 yards last year, 32 touchdowns as a junior. It sounds like he's going to play at the next level on the offensive side of the football. But these are guys that, I don't know, is somewhere in the list. Like, where did he rank in the list? What range?
He was 14th, and I got a soft spot for Michael Terry because remember we were at the All-American Bowl. We went to dinner, and I think it was Mike Roach, Adam Stanko. We were all walking to dinner, prospect, and it was Michael Terry. And I'm like, wait, that's the guy that's catching passes and returning kicks? Because I thought he was like an edge rusher. I wrote, if Michael Bay wants to do another Transformer movie kind of about football players, Michael Terry can be the dude because he can be molded into whatever you want. Coop, 3 school records in track and field there in San Antonio. Hudson Stanton just pointed this out. He has a chance to lead Alamo Heights to a 4A title in the Lone Star State. And he's kind of a one-man show. So a big fan of Michael Terry. I've comped him to Cordell Patterson. And I think the probably most interesting thing I found on him, aside from the Taekwondo, Cooper, go back to when he was a freshman. He was throwing for guys like Will Stein at a camp there at UTSA. He used to be a quarterback, right? So he's played a little bit of everything, a jack of all trades, eventually going to be a master of something. Also, Coop, you're not familiar with Taekwondo. Number 42 on the list, Victor Sanchez Hernandez, committed to Washington, world champion in Taekwondo. Apparently was an Olympic alternate. Washington worked him out this summer. And they decided to take him after he ran a 4.84 in the 40-yard dash at 6'5", 250 pounds. So a lot of Taekwondo flavor here in the 2025 Freaks list.
I'm not hating on it. I'm more amazed at how you're able to get this information. It's not like it's widely broadcasted out there. Drew, I said you don't get enough credit. I do think you're one of the best researchers in the industry. So golf clap on that. The freaks list, it's out. Like I said, we got one more guy I want to bring up because Drew, he's been a little bit of a guy that's, inched his way into our heart. Not like the way Luke Reynolds has, but we love some Mason Posa. And Mason Posa was a guy that we started. Was it the top 100 or the top 247? I don't know what it was. I think he only had Minnesota offer. Does that sound correct?
Yeah, and some regional directional schools. I think some of the schools playing here week 0 had offered.
So Posa, which we love, the linebacker out of New Mexico, a guy that is 91-3 on the wrestling mat, 3-time state champ, and one of those guys that you heard when he made his pledge to Wisconsin. I don't think there's a better marriage between a head coach and a linebacker than Luke Fickell, a former wrestler himself, and Mason Posa. We met some of the staff at Wisconsin at the Player Personnel Symposium. One of them had Mason Posa as a background on his phone. So if that doesn't say it all, then I don't know what does. But Mason Posa, you talk about a dude literally built not only for the Big Ten, but for that specific school in Wisconsin. That is Mason Posa. Drew, I love this kid. Glad he made it on the list.
Yeah, why do we love wrestlers? Why does Luke Fickell love wrestlers? I mean, that grip strength that they develop on the mat and that body control, that all shows up on tape. Mason Posa is going to be the highest ranked prospect to ever come out of New Mexico here in the modern recruiting era. We invited him to the All-American Bowl, fired up to see him there. I think he's a special talent. And Coop, he was being recruited by Arizona State at one point, which is one of the top college wrestling programs. He could have just went that path. Instead, he's going to play football. And, Luke Fickell has continued to recruit wrestlers. Dylan Johnson, a guy from last cycle, I think he's turned some heads there in camp, one that we were super high on, kind of a bull in the China shop there in the middle. So Mason Posa, certainly a name to know as well. And his teammates there in New Mexico, they were also considered for the list as well. A few more wrestlers that are going to play Power 4 football.
All right, the freaks list you can find on 247sports.com, 8,000 words plus of absolute knowledge from the absolute best in Andrew Ivins. And just a reminder, 247sports.com. You can also find wall-to-wall team coverage, recruiting rankings, transfer portal updates as well. 247sports.com. That is the place to be. Drew, great job on the freaks list. We enjoy it year in and year out. And like I said, if you want to read about those names and you want to know what the next 3 to 4 years, some names in college football you need to be keeping an eye on and how it pertains to the, I don't know, what would you call it, 2029 NFL draft, 2028 NFL draft, however far away that is. This is a good jump on that. All right, Drew, time for the transaction wire. Some notable names coming off the board, including Kylan Deere. Alabama just can't get out of the headlines. The number 1 running back in the country, top 50 player per 247 Sports, out of the state of Mississippi. The former Ole Miss commit gives his pledge to the Alabama Crimson Tide. Alabama number 2 in the 247 Sports composite team rankings. This dude, a little bit of a beast, right? He was on the freaks list himself, recorded over 2,000 yards as a junior. Drew, here is your tidbit on Deere. That from last year, one of just 3 2025 running backs on the Under Armour Next Camp Series tour this year to break 4.6 seconds in the 40-yard dash and 4.4 seconds in the short shuttle. Here are the guys that he's joining in Tuscaloosa: Richard Young, Justice Haynes, Daniel Hill. All 3 of those guys were top 247 backs and guys that Alabama fans have a ton of excitement for, including in Haynes and guys like Daniel Hill over the next couple of years. Drew, they are just loaded in the backfield.
They are loading up. I mean, Nick Saban's out, but it's still kind of a status quo there in Tuscaloosa. For me, I think the story here with Alabama, Cooper, remember when we were at the Elite 11 finals and Keelan Russell had just flipped from the SMU to the Crimson Tide, and he's talking about how he was going to have the #1 recruiting class. And I'm like, well, you're the only like offensive skill player that's committed. And he said, no. These guys are coming. Guys are going to come play with me. I think when you look at this unit now, Caleb Cunningham, Caleb Edwards, the tight end, there's a lot to like about what Alabama's offense could be at some point down the line. Like they have found playmakers. Now they've had to go to all different corners of the country. I mentioned it earlier on the show. Alabama's 6 commits right now from the Golden State. But this is a big win for them in SEC country. A.K. Deer was a big priority for Ole Miss. They get the job done. And he is a freak, Cooper. Video out there, him doing waves of squats at 405 pounds, pushing a tire across a field. I'm all in. Our #1 ranked running back, and I think his play style is built for the SEC. North-south runner with some burst.
All right, let's talk about the champs. We're often criticized for not talking about the champs, the defending national champions in the Michigan Wolverines. Sharon Moore trying to get it done on the recruiting trail, and Andrew Marsh, top 70 player in the country, top 10 receiver. That certainly helps. A guy out of the state of Texas that had more than 1,000 yards receiving last year, 15 touchdowns, also had a 6'4" high jump, just like his friend Michael Terry out of the state of Texas, 2,400 plus yards in his career. He becomes the 5th top 100 prospect in Michigan's 12th ranked recruiting class. Drew, pretty intriguing kid to think about what he has in his body from a lower body explosiveness standpoint. A guy that is more of a build speed runner, but you can see him at the catch point, 50-50 balls, can climb the ladder, love his ability in the red zone, more of a build speed guy like I mentioned before. But a pretty intriguing pickup for Michigan, one that's, in the midst of all this college football news, we're a couple days away from week 0, is going to fly under the radar. But I like this get for Sharon Moore and the Wolverines.
I think if you're a Michigan fan, you got to be ecstatic, right? And Bud Elliott of the Cover 3 podcast, Cooper, he texted us last week. He said, hey, can you guys name the starting wide receivers for the Wolverines heading into this season? And I don't think we even replied anything because I didn't know who they were. I mean, it's not a bunch of former blue chip recruits. Now, there is some talent there in Ann Arbor, Samaj Morgan. I mean, there's going to be some guys that catch passes, but they haven't had a ton of success recruiting the best of the best at wide receiver in recent years. That really hasn't been the formula for them. So they're able to get Andrew Marsh, who I think his tape is a little bit better than the in-person evaluations I've had of him. I've seen him at multiple 7-on-7 tournaments, and I'm not trying to knock the player here. I've just always been waiting for him to kind of take over an event and really cement himself as one of those guys. So as he enters his senior season here in the Lone Star State, he is certainly someone I have circled. He's got those binoculars on the next gen there in his player profile card because, Cooper, I think we've learned more and more about the wide receiver board, guys like Jerome Miles, guys like Vernell Brown, right? How does Andrew Marsh stack up with them? But I think if you're Michigan, you absolutely take this guy because what he has in his body fits what you want to do on offense, right? He can block and he can go up and create and win above the shoulder pads.
Yeah, more of a Big Ten physical skill set for what you want on the perimeter. I think he gives Michigan that. And let's face it, Drew, they haven't had a lot of those dynamic #1 receivers, Roman Wilson, Tyler Morris, Ronnie Bell, guys like that in the past. You certainly like and have Sunday ability. But when's the last time they had that guy, Andrew Marsh? Still waiting to see, but we obviously like the physical clay there as well. All right, LSU, Drew, quietly, kind of under the radar, top 5 class in the country, and they're trying to bring it home here. Cade Phillips, a flip from Texas, top 247 corner. Drew, they also add Mike Tyler as well. From South Carolina, the number 36 tight end in the country. Let's talk about Cade Phillips, another guy that was represented on your freaks list, took bronze at the Texas 6A state championship in the long jump, personal best of 24.75. I mean, sometimes I feel like we talk about these metrics and people are like, what are you talking about? Long jump, high jump, triple jump, shot, disc, what does it all mean? Super lower body explosive player. And this guy is a fluid kid, a really skilled athlete that had a lot of production on the offensive side of the ball as well as defense as well. Cade Phillips is one of those guys, Drew. You mentioned the binoculars and the priority watch for guys that we want to watch as seniors that could make that next step. That's Cade Phillips. The first thing that popped into my mind, Corey Raymond has this LSU defensive back haul right now looking a lot different than it has over the last 2 years under Brian Kelly. And that is what he was brought in to do. LSU has a look and a feel for what they want. Typically over the last decade at the defensive back position, DJ Pickett, Cade Phillips, long, fluid, reactionary athletes, both over 6 feet, multiple guys that can play different positions that both play with a little bit of a competitive temperament and attitude. Drew, I love this Cade Phillips pickup for LSU.
Can I give you a spicy take here?
Of course.
I have reason to believe that I think some people in Baton Rouge are more fired up about the addition of Cade Phillips than they are DJ Pickett. And that's not a knock on DJ Pickett. I just think when you look at them in the rankings, DJ Pickett a 5-star, Cade Phillips at the back of the top 247. I don't think the gap is that big, right? And Cade Phillips is a guy dug into him, right? You said he was on the freaks list. I mentioned there was so much LSU flavor on there, but when I polled all these people and worked the phone, different contacts, I can't tell you how many schools brought up Cade Phillips, freak athlete, potential Sunday guy. Those were the words that came after the name Cade Phillips. And you're right, with Corey Raymond there. I mean, this recruiting class, like, I know it's not ranked number 1 overall, but I get super excited as a guy that creates the freaks list. I mean, there are some absolute dudes in here. And then the tight end, Tyler Miller. Coop, have you watched this guy?
Mike Tyler, Petagna flag. Yes,
Mike Tyler,
I watched him this morning.
Tyler Miller's the O-lineman. Right. I think they got a hidden gem out of South Carolina, and I don't like to use that term, but a lightly recruited state, 6'3", 225 pounds. I think you can utilize him as an H-back. They brought in and Tradez Green, Kamorian Pimpton's already there. I think Mike is someone that they can use similar to a Mason Taylor, right? Motion him around, attach him, detach him. He's a natural pass catcher, and I think that's another sneaky good addition for the Tigers.
I like that pickup too, and they're building that tight end room pretty intriguingly. You mentioned Mason Taylor. They don't really have another guy like Mason Taylor, but they have 2 of the guys that are incredibly difficult to find. There are not many of them walking around the entire country, but they got clones of each other in Kamorian Pimpton and Tradez Green, 2 6'7+ tight ends with basketball backgrounds that can play above the rim. Excited about those 2 dudes. You get a guy like Mike Tyler that gives you a little bit of the more traditional inline flex out, can use in the passing game as well. More of an H-back than he is maybe one of those guys that's a little bit closer to a receiver. So LSU getting it done on the recruiting trail, trying to bring home a top 5 class. And lastly, let's talk about Miami and the Canes. They pick up a big one at Bryce Fitzgerald, top 247 safety, ousting in-state rival Florida State. Drew, number 18 safety in the country. Guy popped a 4.48 earlier this spring. He can roll a little bit, had 10 INTs as a junior, which is pretty interesting. I'm watching the combine tape, and the first thing that comes to my mind is like, I don't know how instinctive he is in man-to-man coverage. Put him at the safety position, a lot of ball production there. The traits, Drew, that is something that really kind of stood out to me. I think there's some other things that are waiting to kind of play catch-up a little bit, but I really, really do like the idea of what this guy could look like over the next 3 to 4 years.
And he's young for the grade. I heard from someone that Miami's entertaining the idea of potentially using Bryce as a perimeter corner. I'm kind of with you. I see more safety. He feels and he seems more comfortable in his skin there. You mentioned the ball production, right? I think that is so important for the safeties. You want guys that can locate it, and you want guys that can generate turnovers. Bryce Fitzgerald has done it against stiff competition down in Miami-Dade. He's got a basketball background as well. Someone at their Legend camp, I think 2 years ago, was sticky in coverage. So we've seen flashes of it. Has to get more consistent, I think, in the one-on-one situations, and then has to get more physical in run support. I think that's a question mark. But Miami, you look at the recruiting class, they're pairing him with Amari Wallace, who's a heat-seeking missile from the back end, and Hilton Stubbs, who loves contact as well. So I think he fits in nicely kind of with the other defensive backs that they have committed and what they're able to do.
All right, Drew, time for some questions. We haven't answered questions on this show in quite some time. And who else to start with than Canes Cats Heat 305? And guess what? Canes Cats Heat 305. Let me give you your flowers, man, because he was in the comments on Monday on our show on CBS Network, and he said, guess what? I just upgraded to cable for these guys. So we appreciate you, Canes Cats. We know you're a diehard listener. He says, question to Andrew and Coop, which high school games will you be at this week, and which players are you excited to see from where you will be attending this weekend? Drew, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I'm going down to the Broward Showcase. Games Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Miami Northwestern's playing on Thursday night. Want to see Calvin Russell up close in person. Eric Thomas, the defensive tackle, is also transferred in, a Syracuse commit. So fired up for that one. And then on Friday night, you got Milton versus American Heritage. That would be Luke Nickel versus Dia Bell. That will be kind of the appetizer for Saturday's slate, which is Chaminade Madonna and Bosco, and then Gorman and St. Thomas Aquinas. I mean, you name it, Coop. I don't know if you saw the cut up on Jet Washington from last week, the 2026 safety there at Bishop Gorman. Hudson Standish shot it my way. Dude was all over the field making plays. And then obviously Derek Meadows, he's on the freaks list, LSU commit, 5-star wide receiver. We want to see the production, what he's able to do. So he's another one that I've got circled. I'm going to be honest, though. I have not really dug into these rosters. I've been so dialed into the 2027 rankings, the freaks list. I need to hit reset. So that's the plan for tomorrow before I get out there and take in some football.
All right. So I think I will be heading down to Tuscaloosa at some point today or tomorrow. Going to try to catch a fall practice with the Crimson Tide and kind of see what those guys look like. I got to check out and see the Ryan Williams hype for myself, Drew. Get a little bit of a barometer test there. And then outside of that, you know what I was looking at? Thompson versus Grayson in Alabama. Drew, Jared Smith, 5-star committed to Auburn. I think that's one we want to make sure we're buttoned up on. Still trying to make plans of whether or not that's going to happen or not, but we'll have the tape. Whether or not we'll get the live evaluation, we'll see on that. All right, Drew, a little bit more of a granular, generic football question. George asks, I have a question. What is the scenario for Florida beating Miami on the opening day? Drew, you are, I don't know, the way that I'm connected to LSU, you're the same way that you're connected to Florida. So it's not really your take on this game. I would love your dad's take on this game because I know you've talked to your dad about this. What does Florida have to do to win this game against Miami?
I think my handicapping of this game, right, like the way I see it, I think it's going to be low scoring, right? I think you look at Mario Cristobal, you look at Billy Napier, what they've done in these big games, right? They are very conservative. They will take some shots and opportunities, but they don't want to take a ton of risks. And I think we've seen that in multiple, big showings. And I'm sure you can point to some examples of where, hey, yeah, they scored a bunch of points here. Hey, they scored a bunch of points there. I think it's going to be a lot like when these two programs met a few years ago in Orlando, week 0, when it was Dan Mullen versus Manny Diaz. So I think for Florida, take advantage of the opportunities that you're going to get. You got to find ways to limit Cam Ward and his ability to extend plays and get outside of the pocket. Cooper, I know you picked him on Monday's show as was your Heisman winner, right? Cam Ward, I think I was right there with you. I don't think a lot of people realize the type of magic that he has, right? What he's able to do when as a freelancer off script. So I think containing him is going to be important. And then I think if for Florida, they're going to have to also figure out a way to stop that run. I know the Gators have had some injuries, working in a lot of new linebackers there. So that's kind of my handy. I'm expecting low scoring, Cooper. I don't know if you have a take on the game. And I think for Florida, get Eugene Wilson involved. I don't know what Miami's answer is going to be when it comes to having someone stick with him. I don't know if they have someone that can match up with him. And I'm expecting a big year for Trey Wilson.
Yeah, come out swinging, both teams. The reality is Billy Napier is coaching for his job. He has a incredibly difficult schedule, one of the hardest schedules we've seen in quite some time. In Miami, you got two programs that one's 11-14, one's 12-13. This is a critical year 3 for both of these guys. Do not be conservative. Do not wait for the other team to make a mistake and capitalize. be the team that's the aggressor. Who's going to do that? Is that going to be Billy Napier or is that going to be Mario Cristobal? And Mario Cristobal, I'll tell you what, when he's playing teams like Ohio State or when he's the underdog in the Pac-12 championship a couple years ago against USC when I was out there at Oregon, that's no issue. When you're the favorite, it's a little bit different. I want both of these teams to come out like they have something to prove with a chip on their shoulder because they're both capable of doing that, in my opinion. Two guys in Graham Mertz, Cam Ward that I think are going to get a lot of NFL consideration. Get behind and rally behind a guy like Cam Ward and show the country what your team can be. If you're Florida, you have no room for mistakes, zero margin of error. This is a game that I would like to see, like pull out all the stops, whatever it is. That mentality has got to be reflected on that field. I want to see that from not only one team, but from both of these teams. It should be a slugfest because this game sets the tone for a very critical season for both of these guys. Both of these guys got to find a way to try to claw 9-10 wins, especially Miami. With that schedule, they should win the ACC, be firmly in the college football playoff conversation. And in my mind, they should win this game by 10-plus points. That's the way Mario Cristobal has to be thinking. We'll see. Florida, the other part of this, just to get back to the root of the question, they're capable of winning this game, right, from what we've seen. So we'll see. It's going to be one of the more fascinating games on the first week of the slate, and it's going to be a great slate as well. All right, last question here from Andrew. He says, Texas losing both running backs before its season is a kick in the nuts. Do you think Baxter takes a medical red shirt? I don't really know what you mean by that. Yeah, he's going to have to redshirt. He didn't redshirt last year, so he's not going to be able to play this year, coming off an injury in the LCL and PCL.
I think what he's asking here is, okay, do you think he comes back for one more year than he originally was planning to? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean it depends. It's a talented backfield. But yeah, you're saying that he's going to play 2 more years after this?
Yeah, instead of just one. I think that's more of the question.
Yeah, it depends. If he can come back next year, have 1,000-yard plus season, show that the knee is progressing. It's hard. It's a little bit of a catch-22 for him. What I would say is, you're a little bit more in your prime as a running back when you're in college, but you have less tread going to the NFL. I still think C.J. Baxter, working into that 100% form next year, coming back from an injury, if he's good to go, I don't see why there's any reason for him to come back. I think he could still be an early day 2 draft choice. And you got to remember, that the running back position is devalued as it is. Your rebuttal to this is going to be stay another year, get paid more money than you would in the NFL, because that's going to be on the table as well.
That's what I was going to say. I think you bring up some good points. What does the knee look like? And we've come so far with the ACL rehabs. But when he went down, when Ruben Owens went down, we said it on this show or in this space. Who's feeling the most effects from this? I'm like, it's the people that are on these deals, because you might be losing a year on one of these running backs, and I don't know how it's going to shake out. I would think the injury keeps him in college one more year than originally anticipated. Now he can come out in 2025, and like you said, he can run for 1,200 yards, and he could be the next Jahmyr Gibbs. I don't know yet. I didn't see him in practices. Sounds like he was doing really well. We saw flashes of it as a freshman. So I'm leaning towards them getting an extra year out of him.
All right, week 0, right around the corner, Dublin, Ireland. That's the game everybody's talking about. We got Florida State, number 10 ranked team in the country, against Georgia Tech, Haynes King. Polarizing Haynes King. When you look at the TD to INT ratio, don't know which guy you're going to get. Drew, we talked a little bit about it on Monday, but I don't know, not so much the game, but when you talk about Florida State, is there one player or one thing you're looking at where you're just like, man, I hope this emerges based on maybe the way we saw the player, that it hasn't hit yet? And you and I were talking about it before the show. That guy for me is Hakeem Williams, right? There is a big hole in Florida State's receiver depth chart. They got Malik Benson coming over from Alabama. They have to replace Keon Coleman, Johnny Wilson, both those guys off to the NFL. Who's going to be the guy to step up And what does that look like? And I look at this guy that I remember that we were so excited about, me specifically, and say, wow, what a primetime opportunity. I know he's been battling some injuries, but Hakeem Williams is a guy that I'm like, all right, we got to get this guy right. I know he has the ability. There should be an opportunity where he could step up and go ball out.
3 TD Hakeem Williams game. I'm going to speak it into existence. No, for me, Cooper,
we need it.
Marvin Jones Jr., former 5-star recruit from us, transfers in from Georgia. He's been dealing with some injuries. Asked around about how he's looked. I think he has started to come on here. I think there is a lot to Marvin Jones Jr. Is he going to emerge here? There's some talent, obviously, up front for the Seminoles, but he's someone I'll have my eye on. And then his former teammate, Earl Little, in the secondary. That's another one as well.
Yeah, Roydell Williams at running back. Florida State, would they take like 5 Alabama transfers this year? They've had some success with that, poaching some players from the SEC. Looking forward to that game as well. Also, a quick little shout out to Bud Elliott. If you're trying to get educated for these week 0, week 1 games, there is no better place to go to than Bud Elliott and Cover 3's Summer School playlist. Make sure you can find that on the Cover 3 podcast as well. Guys, we appreciate you joining us as always. College football is here. Thank you from the Oyster Boys to the bottom of our heart. I know recruiting year-round, 365 days, sometimes it can get a little bit boring, but we appreciate you guys sticking with us. For Andrew Ivins, I'm Cooper Petagna. Have a great rest of your week. We'll see you next Wednesday.